Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron back for the sixth show here in the last 6 weeks, one a week. I'm going to go for 13 at least, maybe more later, depends on how far we get here. I want to say I had a nice show prepared for this week, and on Friday, sometime Saturday morning maybe, I can't remember now whether it was Friday or Saturday, I got information that some new information came out about the bond package. So I'm going to devote most of the show tonight about the bond package. And its update, and then I'm going to take advantage of that update to use it as an example in my little discourse on how to run the town as a business, because it is a business. The first thing I'd like to say is that new song you heard tonight was an old song called "Oh Dear, What Can the Matter Be?" It was played for me when I was a kid many times, and I heard a lot when I was in England. It's an English folk song. And I thought it was kind of appropriate for tonight since we're going to be talking about the bond issue. I have a few guests tonight. One of them is my old school teacher, 8th grade. That's my class picture I think you see behind me. I can't see anything here, but it's Barbara Klug. She was a farmer up in Torrington, up on top of Island Avenue, and she was also a teacher. And she was excellent, and she taught me how to save my money and a lot of other lessons in life. She was also a businesswoman, and she wasn't a politician. She was a businesswoman, and she spent all her time trying to teach us in those days. Some of us weren't easy learners. We thank her for that. The other guest I have tonight is the old Winchester one-room school building. It's not up right now, but you'll see that later when we change the picture. And that's because most of our program tonight is going to be talking about schools. So I said, well, I'll go up to Winchester, take a picture of the one-room schoolhouse. It dates back to about late 1700s, and then it burned down, and there were 2 chimneys on it, and it caught fire and burned down. Somebody rebuilt it, and then in 1906 it was rebuilt. The picture you see here is 1906, and it has a little story attached to it. If anybody's interested in that, it's posted on the door up there. And I also have a copy. If anybody wants, let me know at my address or my email address or my post office box, and I'll send you a copy of the legend that's posted on the door. They actually could use a new plaque up there. Maybe I'll donate one. The other guests I have tonight, you'll see later, will pop up in the show. If we get that far, I'm not sure we're going to get that far because I want to spend more time than I thought I would on the bond issue. But we have 2 guests. One is the ladies in the town clerk's office. And then we have 2 guests from the assessor's office, because we're going to be talking a little bit about voting and about tax relief. So if we get that far tonight, we'll show their pictures. If we don't, we'll wait until next week. All right, thank you very much. Now, I have the agenda up here on the board, and if we can focus on the agenda, I'll just go over it quickly. We may not get through the whole agenda because of the bond thing. So my comments are pretty well over. The 41.9 million bond package is next. It's not going to be called the 41.9 million bond package anymore because it has changed its complexion, and we will talk about that in a few minutes. And then I was going to talk about vision appraisal and give you their website. And again, I did that last week, but I was going to repeat it again this week. And then some notices, progress to date. And then I was going to get more into creating an environment for success part 2. And there I would be talking a little bit about the Board of Education, a little bit more about the town manager and some other issues like that. And then expediting the solution, which was really supposed to be this show this week, but because it was so important to talk about the charter, because that's such an environment for success, that without the businessmen in the selectmen's chairs, and without the changes in the charter, none of this, the rest of this is going to be possible. So I have to dwell on this in the beginning, because we're at the beginning of the triangle now that I showed you the last few weeks, and we need to take time now so that we go down the slope of the triangle over the weeks and years, and we don't go up the slope into infinity. And then once again, I'll talk a bit about the 9 business candidates that I've selected here to talk about, because they have some business experience that I know, and I have also some criteria for how I selected these people to talk about. Again, I'm not the one. You have to make up your own mind who you vote for, and you should talk to all the candidates. I think there's, I don't know, 20 or 30 of them, and see what you think their backgrounds are. So with that, I will go to the bond issue. First thing I want to say before we talk about the bond issue is when I did talk about my early warning signs, I think I mentioned on the show, if I didn't, it's one of the 17 or 18 conditions that we were told in the beginning of this whole bond package that the roof was going to cave in and it was a real emergency in the town, and how unsafe things were, etc. But evidently last week the insurance men went out. I saw this in the newspaper, and they looked at the schools and they say there are no safety problems in the school system. They're very adamant about that. And I wanted to bring it to your attention. You can see the article if you go to a library, either library in town, and look through the Waterbury Republican in the local section there. They do have an article written about that. Now, at the same time, they were very adamant about having no safety problems in there, in the buildings, which I didn't think they would have that bad anyway. Otherwise, the insurance company would have said something a long time ago about it, and we would have had to do something a long time ago. So I'm glad to see that. I think this week they're going through the town buildings and the insurance people, and they're gonna pass judgment on those as well. My guess is they'll probably be in the same sort of shape. There'll be things to be done, but they'll probably be safe. I'm not sure. We'll find out next week or in a week after when we get the report. Now, there were some problems pointed out about that. One was there are some fire code problems cited by the fire marshal. That were cited by the fire marshal. They brought those out in the newspaper. They're not the exact examples, but the fact that we did have some problems. There are some accessibility problems cited by the federal officials, but from a safety standpoint, and I quote right from the article, the buildings are safe and they meet the Connecticut Interlocal Risk Management Agency, CIRMA, standards. That's all I have to say about that right now, but please pass the word around town that these schools are safe. There are problems that we need to fix, and we need to address those, and everybody knows that, and I think everybody agrees to that, a certain amount of them. So our big problem is keeping things in perspective at all times, not losing our head, and not yelling, crying wolf, or anything like that. So now I'm going to put up my first slide, and I'm going to need a little second slide, actually. I hope that shows up well, and that is the latest bond package paper came out, and it's dated October 15th, 07, and this is now totals $42,484,000, and the last one was about $41,875,000 plus interest. Both of these are plus interest, and I will show you a slide in a few minutes about the plus interest because it's an enormous amount of money, and it really jacks that $42,884,000 up. And in the past, we were told it was 2 mils plus interest. Okay, and nobody ever really specified that, although it is in the Dick's papers in the bond package. We did see that, and it was factored into my 14% that I was talking about. So we were aware of that. So this, from now on, I'm going to be talking about not the $42,484,000 bond package, but I'm going to be talking about the $54 million bond package, or whatever it is, when you include the interest, if it ever indeed gets through the referendum. So that's what it is, $42,484, and it's changed from the last time. It also was broken into two bond issues, two bonds this time. It's evidently, from what I'm told by the town hall, it's going to be one referendum for one package, but it's going to have two bonds in it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We have a formula that I used. What I did is I got the papers from the town, from people who got it from the town, and I went through and did the calculations over the weekend. That's one of the reasons I'm changing the show, because the 14% slide that I've had up in the past is now going to change a little bit. And here's the formulas that I use for, this is more complex this time to give you the information, so I want to take great care here in explaining it to you. And that is that the formula for tax projections is new bond. That's new bond information from Mr. Dix, right off from his papers, and it's plus the 2006 bond. Remember last time I told you that was going to be about, starting out at about $1 million and then dropping over the years, over the next 15 or so years, down to zero sooner or later for the capital and the interest on that last bond. And then I added $1 million for the town. The $1 million is for the town budget will go up at least $1 million every year, 3% or so. That's inflation, and I put in $1 million for that. So those three things equal this tax projection that I'm going to be showing you in a few minutes. That's before revaluation. After revaluation, it'll be this tax projection plus what we called last time the reevaluation effect, and that is any money any tax increase or decrease that comes from the revaluation. And remember now, the revaluation will produce an average an average assessment for the town, and then some people will be over that, some will be under it, and their taxes will be affected either positively or negatively in that manner. So we're not going to go that in great detail. That's a whole course for a semester at Harvard, so we're not going to be doing that anymore. But you can always go to the town hall, and you can look next week when I or even this week if I get to, you can look more at the reval website and get more information and get more questions answered there. Also, you can, in December, we're going to know what our taxes increase or decreases are going to be, so that'll be around December, as I said last week. Now, this is the next slide is, sorry, I put that up. The hardest part about the show, by the way, is playing the music, because I'm getting very nervous when we play the music, and we have to start over a couple times. I'm still not really recovered from that, but anyway, now here's the tax forecast. It used to be the big 14% that I put up. Now it is broken down, and they call it in their Dix package. Mr. Dix is the one who put the numbers together for the town, the consultant. Year one. Year one is a movable, it's a variable, not a fixed thing. But for purposes of this explanation, I picked 208, 209 to be year one. So the total effect of 208 and 209 for tax purposes for we citizens is 6.21% increase next year if this formula holds true. If they raise the town taxes more than 1 mil, then or if they cut expenses so they don't have to raise it 1 mil, then it'll be a different result, either plus or minus the 6.21%, higher or lower. Then it goes up the next year to 7.4% if done according to plan after the bond package passes the referendum. And then it moves up to 10.62% the following year, and then 11.46%, and then 15.51%. And it kind of stays in the 15s for 3 or 4 years, 15.63, 15.45, 15.39, and then it starts to come down a bit, 15.21, 15.12, 15.24, and then 11.91 and 11.25. And I've only done that many years. It goes on longer. I forget whether it's 16 or 17 years, but I just wanted to give you an example of what's happening over the next 10 years or so if the bond package gets approved. Now, if it doesn't get approved, now imagine there'll be some bond package approved eventually, but if it doesn't get approved, then these numbers will be, of course, different, right? Don't ask me what they'll be. It depends on the yearly budgets and what other bond packages come up along the way, or what other emergencies happen, or whether the state gives us more money or less money, that all be affected. So I did show you that, and I'll be putting that up from week to week until that changes. And, you know, we won't dwell upon it every week, but we will let you know. So that's that. Now, the next and very important thing is that the breakdown of the bond packages. They've been broken into 2 packages instead of 1. Instead of the 41.9 million bond, it's now going to be 2 bonds in 1 package. I'm sorry if I said 2 packages. It's 2 bonds in 1 package. And that is the school-related bond will be $31,972,000 plus interest. Right? And we'll explain interest in a little later. But in the town issues is a second bond, and that's broken up into $10,012,000 plus interest, for a total of the number I gave you earlier on the last slide, $41,984, and $41,984,000 plus interest, and that's very important. The total cost of the new package, and hold on to your seatbelts now, because I'm going to give you the total cost, so your whole thinking is going to change now from 41.9 million. But by the way, the 41.9 million also had interest associated with it too. I can't remember the exact number. Somewhere around 7 to 9 million was interest on top of that. So you'd have to add that to the 41.9 million. Here it's going to be a total of $56,040,772. And the bond is the $42,484,000 for the two bonds that we talked was on the last slide. And then the interest will be $13,560,772 under certain conditions. And I'm going to talk about those conditions in a few minutes. Things can change there very easily. I think this package needs a lot of work on it, from a business viewpoint before it's ever accepted at a referendum. But and that's what I want to talk about tonight. So you have that number, and then you take that number, and you get the 56 million, and you subtract. This is what the 56 million is made up of here. Then you subtract from it the expected grants that we're going to get back from both of the bond packages, if we get them, and if we get the amounts that we think we're going to get. If we get more than we think we're going to get, it'll be a different number. If we get less than we think we're going to get, it'll be a different number. And Murphy's Law says, well, it probably won't be less. It'll probably be more. And, other countries have an equivalent of Murphy's Law, but in America it's Murphy's Law. So the total amount that we, the taxpayers, are going to have to pony up here if things go according to this package, and there's a lot of this in the package, there's a lot of reservations in there I'll talk about. It's $34,588,772. Now, so it's not 19 or 20 million plus interest. It's 34,588,772. That's what we're going to have to spend out of our pockets over the years. And now, let me point out that we're going to have to pay, let's say, I think I might even have a slide for it, we're going to have to pay roughly 21,000 something out of our pockets plus interest. Well, the 13,560,772 is 64% more than that. So we're paying 100% of what we have to pay plus 64% more for the interest. And that's a pretty big bite. And you can buy a lot of buildings with $13 million, and you can do a lot of remedies and modifications and enhancements. It's a lot of money. And I think it has to be thought about very, very carefully, and it can't be ignored by us as we go to vote for this request. Now, the school bond is broken down, not anywhere near as much as I'd like to see it broken down, but it's broken down into 4 different packages. One is for, I just abbreviated the schools here, you probably know them better than I do, but one of them's for Pearson School is 47 million. For the Bachelor School, it's 6,500,000. For the Hinsdale School, it's 8,500,000. And then there's a 472,000 for things like the Clerk of the Works and other expense-related type things that we're going to have to pay along the way. And that totals up to our 32,472, but it doesn't include the interest. The interest is added to that. The second bond, now this is broken down much better. I think we can still break it down more, which I want to talk about tonight, but this is the town bond. And the town bond, I'm not going to go through each of these breakdowns, but I do have, also, I'll just flash it up for a minute, I'm not going to leave it up, but I have abbreviations there, and then I've got a little scale that goes with it. If anybody wants, let me know, and I'll send you a copy of both of these. All this information I got here is available to you if you want any of it. But anyway, it adds up to 10,012,000, and it's broken down by police station and fire station, some of them twice, and Highland Lake, a couple projects up there, and it's all broken down. Now, the bigger ones are the ones that I think need to be broken down some more when we go to do, and by the way, not all be included in the same bond either necessarily. We'll talk some about that. But there are about 15 different pieces here. One of them's 3 million, and then one of them's 2,260,000, and then one of them's 1,290,000. All the rest fall down in the $100,000 to $500,000 area. Now, the showstoppers that I see in here, and I really mean they're showstoppers, there's 4 points here which you can't see, so I'll just read them off to you quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on them, but the first, when you read the package, it says that the selectmen, and somebody might say selectmen and somebody else, but basically whoever's in charge in the end, once we have the bond package, they may reduce or modify the scope of the projects, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the projects as so reduced or modified. So that means if they set out to do all these projects and one of them isn't going too well, or they want to switch money around, as they said from day one, they did want to be able to do that, they can do that. And if they get to the point where they can't even do some of the work because they had to move the money from one project to another, then they may do that, okay? We as taxpayers, I don't think we want that to happen. I think what we would rather do is have each project in a separate bond, without getting too ridiculous. Maybe there could be 2 of them in one bond or 3, but we'd have to look at that. And then have it very carefully funded, and we should know exactly what's going to happen with the money, and then it should happen, whatever they say is going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then they have to stay within that bond money to be able to solve any of the problems or reduce some of the work and not solve the problems, but they can't rob from Peter to pay Paul without the approval of the taxpayers. So this thing allows them to do that, and you've got to be very careful about that. I wouldn't allow it myself, but okay, I wouldn't allow that on somebody doing that on my house, you know. So we can talk more about it sometime when we have time. We don't have that much time tonight, but the school bond is reduced by the number of grants we receive. Well, if we receive the grants, great. If we don't, that's not so great. So we need to make sure that we know before we approve this bond package what we're going to get back, and we have to have plans that are good enough to be able to get that information, or we shouldn't approve it. The next is the school bond issue and renew temporary notes in anticipation of the receipt of the bond sales for the project not to exceed $32,472,000. That means they got permission to go out and borrow short-term money up to $32,472,000, and that's okay, providing we know exactly under all conditions what's going to happen there. And I'm not so sure the plan is solid enough for us to give them that kind of latitude right now. The next is town bond to delete in their entirety one or more of the projects if necessary. That means they could take and knock out anything to do with the fire department and do more police work or more other work, or they could do just the opposite. So that's something that I don't think we should allow. I think that's something we have to watch very carefully, make sure the specifications are much better than they are today before we would ever approve something like that. That doesn't mean the voters won't approve it. I mean, the voters will approve whatever they want to approve, but I'm just saying to you, as it were my money, I wouldn't approve it with those things. Now I'm going to talk a bit about risk, and that is the bonds allow favoring one project, as we just talked about, over another to the extent of dropping parts if necessary. That's a big risk for people involved. And the town people should be very aware, managers should be very aware of that, because they may be affected by any switch in that. I wouldn't allow that. The next, the bonds are based upon very rough estimates. They're not firm bids, and there's no guarantees from any of the vendors. Matter of fact, they haven't chosen any vendors yet. So we're far from having a plan where we can really know exactly what we need to do and how much it's going to cost, and be able to control the expenses and not be switching them around. So I wouldn't allow that either. The next is school bonds assume 70% return from the grants. That's okay if we get to 70%. There are no guarantees that we will get to 7%. And at this point, it's probably best to plan properly and firm up the guarantees before we charge ahead and approve any bond package. The town assumes some return from others, the town budget. The school gets most of theirs, I guess, from the state. I'm not exactly sure about that. But the town is also planning on getting some money back, a little less, a lot less involved there, but it does have some. So if that doesn't come back, then we, the taxpayers, will either have to do it or some work won't get done one way or the other. So again, it's best to firm that up before agreeing any package. And the interest rate is based upon today's rates. I think it's jumped around since the last time they submitted the first bond package. I think we have a different interest rate today than we did then. I'm not positive, but anything could happen here between now and approving this bond package and getting it implemented X years from now, whatever it is, 6 years or whatever from now. And I'm not exactly sure about the timing on that, but there's plenty of things can happen with the interest rates in the meantime. And my view is it's best to slow down and plan properly and make sure you know more about things before you enter into any of this. And that $13 million or 64% of the cost is for interest. And after grants, I'm very concerned about that. And then there are, in the package, there are also a bunch of financial hedges. And I haven't seen the whole package. I've just seen what's available to me from the town, and that's a very small piece of paper. There's much more information that hasn't been released yet to the public. And when we see that, we'll probably have more concerns or less concerns when we see the information. But there's financial hedges in there, things like avoiding arbitrage, and these are technical matters in the financial community, which I don't really want to go into here. Okay, so now, the other thing these two bonds don't cover are other needs, future needs, and future may be next year or 10 years from now. Nobody really knows. I really want to point out again, though, that remember the triangle here, that if you, you're watching me now, okay, remember the triangle here, and I've got it on here down the bottom, you maybe can't see it, but that we talked about in the last few weeks. We really want to get the definition done up front and go down the hill. We don't want to do minimum definition, which I think we're doing here, and then go up the hill and maybe never get finished or drop a lot of projects along the way or not get our money's worth or pay too much for what we do get. I think we got a lot of work to do here as a town in the planning, not just the school building committee or the bond or the you know, the ad hoc bond committee. It's the whole town that has to get involved in this, and all the political parties and all the managers, and really understand it and be happy with it. So I was always told when I was young that you never go to the candy store on an empty stomach, or you never even go to the store on an empty stomach. And I think it looks maybe like we've gone here to the store on a bit of an empty stomach, and we've come up with this 64% interest, 13,760,772. So now what I want to do is try to show you another approach. I'm speeding up a little here because I've got another half hour to go. And one of the things that I was always told by an old banjo teacher of mine is that there's a lesson in that if you can't play anything slow on the banjo or anything else, you can't play it fast. So we have to slow down. We have to understand exactly what we're getting into. We've got to get more definition. We've got to get less risk. And we've got to, as a town, take a more business-like approach to this. Now, how do we do this? The town is already proposed, the town bond is already proposed as 15 projects. The larger ones need to be broken down further for financing purposes, in my opinion. And I think other people agree with me on that too. And then we see if we can get more, we can get those larger ones broken down, the 3 million and the 2 and the 1 thing, and get those in pieces that we can then look at, and we can trade off priorities between those and other issues in the town that we may need. And so I've come up with what I think is a better way to approach this, more business-like manner, is to break it up into smaller projects, spread out over a longer time period, these projects, allow for proper definition and bidding, minimize the risk and exposure, pay much less interest, and synchronize with budget reductions, if practical, where practical, and some of these things may be more important than the things we're spending money on today. I don't know. The town needs to, businessmen need to address that and with the town managers and see what can be done. Or, and have smaller, hopefully, tax increases. But I've also put up here the new revenue additions as we finally grow the net grand list appreciably. And that's a very key part of this whole thing that we've been talking about in the last few weeks, is that if we can synchronize all this work we want to do with the new money that may come in, and we can make this new money come in faster, then that would be excellent for the town. That doesn't mean we don't need some bond issues or some budget cuts or some more tax increases in the meantime, but once the whole town sees all this information, one of the things that really worries me about this whole bond package is the fact that we don't have the information. We have to go and knock on the door in the town hall every day trying to get things and get information so that we, the rest of the town, can look at it objectively. It's very hard to get it, and that's not a good sign in any time. Okay, now what I want to point out is that here's the potential earnings growth we've been talking about over the last few weeks. We can marry these two things up together, which is what I suggested we do a couple of years ago, and the Republican Party, the Independent Party, and the Taxpayer Association all agree with me on this, providing certain conditions were met. For example, if we did pick the development, and we did have the development, instead of some other option like a new factories were moving to town or something, that it didn't have, it had minimum amount of children in that would get our very heavy cost for us now to educate. Now it turns out that maybe we can even absorb a couple of hundred children now, because the schools evidently have more capacity than the number of children that are in. I don't know, I'm not an expert on that, but I hear that from people around town, so maybe that having some children up there wouldn't be as bad a thing as we thought. Tony Solano is going to be on the Buddha Hazy show tonight talking once again about that development, answering questions, and people can call in. If you can get through on the phones, then you can ask any kind of question you want. But you can always go downtown and check into all the information that's been made part of the public record and on that whole development, and you can see exactly what all the conditions are and what's been agreed to, and what, you know, all kinds of. There's a lot of information around that anybody in town. It's all public information. You can get at any of it. So if you want to learn more about it, you can do that. But anyway, if we go back to the slide now, we can see I put up 3 spreadsheets last week, and I've been passing them around town, and I started to have meeting with some of the town leaders, and now I haven't got very far. I've talked to 2. I've got another one scheduled for Thursday. But what I'm trying to do is show them these 3 spreadsheets, and I'm giving it out to anybody who calls me and asks me, and several people have done that, and I've passed it out, and I've explained it to some people. But basically, what it shows is that if we stay on the same path we've been on for 10 years, we're not going to have any savings or any money to put in towards any of this work that's in the bond package. Almost none. We're going to have to raise taxes to be able to do this bond package, and then if that's what everybody in the end votes for, that's what we'll do. The other option I said last week was to have a plan that over the years, and it's many years, it's not next year or the year after, but to grow from 3.52% average growth a year, which is about inflation, that's why we're even every year, to 6%, if we can get there. It's going to be a hard road, and we may never get there, but go from 3.52. Now, if we do that, I'm not going to repeat that whole thing because it was on last week's show, but if anybody wants a copy of the spreadsheets, let me know, and I'll give them to you, and I'll even come and explain if you want me to. But basically, those objectives, if achieved on that, without the development and without the stuff up on the hill, we'll start to bring in some money. And in 3 years, it'll bring in 110,000, 113 after we pay our normal 3.52% expenses. Now, that's not a lot of money, but that's a start. It's better than all these zeros over here. The next year it goes to 214, 215, then it goes to 340, then it goes to 471. This is what we would call in business profit. We can spend it any way we want. We can spend it at fixing the buildings or putting into a sinking fund for later fixing of the buildings. 626, 735, 664. Before I go on that one, I'll move to the next one. The next one is going up at having what I call quantum leap. That's when we get into town, we start getting the development money in. If the development turns out to be the quantum leap, if the development ever goes forward and we can get it in here, then we'll be back to our chart here again. And if we can switch to the chart again, you'll see in 3 years we get in this 113. That's basically from here, and then 214, and then 3. So for the first 4 or 5 years, we're going to get nothing from the development, and that's what I show in my spreadsheets. Then the development will start coming in, and when it comes in, there'll be 1,193,598 in here to spend. And then the next year there'll be another 1,417,000, almost 1,418,000 almost. Then 1,545,000 that following year. And we're starting now to get into where we'll be able to support ourselves, where we'll be able to put money away into sinking funds, where we'll be able to spend the money on the town things that are in this bond issue. But we have to make this happen. Now, this has already slipped some because we and the developers are not in sync. We're not we're not working together as a team to make this whole thing happen in a satisfactory way. We're working together, but we could be working more efficiently and faster and still provide a safe solution for everybody. I've sat through almost all these meetings for the first year and a half. I don't go anymore now because it's starting to be repetitious, but I know what's happening there, and I can tell you that there are pros and cons to the whole thing, but and the bottom line is it's very beneficial for this town at a time when we really do need something like this, and there is nothing else like it on the horizon. So this is one we should pay very careful attention to. Now I'll put up the second slide, which takes us a little more into the future, and that is the 0 to 6% ones keeps going till it gets up, in many years it gets up to almost 1 million a year. But when we look at the other, it starts growing, it gets up to 2 million a year, then it gets up to 2.5 million a year. Then once it's all developed and we're only getting in tax money, we're not getting any new people going into new houses there because they're all full and they've sold all their houses and everybody's living there, then we'll drop back to our 6% again. And we'll be getting about 1 million a year. Now, none of these are adjusted for, well, they are in my package, they are adjusted for inflation, but inflation will take its share along the way. So all these numbers here, I've already left inflation in the budget. So this is after inflation, unless inflation goes through the roof and it gets higher than 3.5% a year on average, 3%. I allowed 3.5%. If it gets up to 10% a year inflation, then of course, this doesn't mean too much to us anymore. It's still money and it's still good, but there's a different set of circumstances. Now, these are based on my 3 growth objective spreadsheets, which anybody can get a copy of. And if we ever get this far, then we're finally on our feet, and good business teamwork is what we need to get us there. We need good, run like a business, and we need to move in that direction. Now, I want to point out a few things that when we do move, we have to beware, because moving fast involves more problems that to be resolved. And I think I can use this analogy now. I'm always leery of using sports analogies, but since everybody plays sports now, and UConn's so great in women's basketball and men's basketball, and women are involved in all kinds of sports now, maybe I can use a sports analogy. And that is that when I was a kid in Torrington, Connecticut, if you played basketball and you try, first of all, the women were very constricted. The rules were very tight, and they could hardly do anything. It was a half-court game almost, but and I'm not an expert on it. But the men, we couldn't dribble behind our back. We couldn't make a mistake. We couldn't touch any other of the players, or we'd get called for a foul. There were all kinds of and if you made a mistake, you were taken out of the game. You were taken out of the game. And I was never even put in the game because I wasn't good enough. But those who got in the game and made a mistake, they were taken out. It was a very, very different game than it is today. Now, today, if you watch the pros, they make 80 mistakes a game. The best players throw the ball away. They double dribble. They bang other people. It's almost like a football game nowadays. The game is much faster, and they make more mistakes. But evidently, it's a more interesting game for people, and it's more lucrative for the owners, and they got worldwide growth in basketball now, and it all seems to be. I personally won't go to a game anymore because the game is the least part of the whole thing now. It's a show, So, but things have changed. Well, we have to change too, and people change. So, in a way, that's why I say we have to change the charter, because we have to get to the point where we can move faster and where we can keep up with modern growth and modern competition. So, when we do move fast, we have to be aware. It involves more problems, and we have to resolve them along the line. So we have to have the right kind of management, the right kind of objectives, and the right kind of environment to be able to move faster and to be able to get these kind of numbers I just showed you on the last slide, so that we don't have to rely on these kind of big, expensive bond issues in the future. We'll still need bond issues, but they will be more selective. They'll be smaller and more predictable, and more manageable. The next thing is you'll need all the help that you can get when you try to identify and resolve problems. So everybody has to work together. It's like a team again. Everybody has to work together. And if they got one person is goofing up the team all the time, well, maybe they need to take them out of the game, and they do that quite often. Sometimes they just take them out to rest them and let them get some rest. I can't tell you how important that is, that teamwork and that whole point there. So what we have going on now in town has to stop, or we're going to have more bigger bond issues coming if we don't do that. And then we'll be tripping over these bond issues before you know it, because next year, if we put this bond issue out and then the state drops our revenue by $500,000, I've said this on other shows here, we're in trouble. We're going to have to go to the taxpayer to get it, or go for another bond issue, I guess. So the other thing is we have to keep our head at all times. Good managers keep their head. Good sports figures keep their head. I don't think I ever saw Michael Jordan lose his head. Even in the most difficult of circumstances, he would say, "Give me the ball. I'm not going to lose my head." Okay, now he made mistakes, don't get me wrong, and he made some, and I use only that as an example. I've been around a lot of very famous sports people because I went to Kansas University when they were tops in the country, and we had Gale Sayers there and Wilt Chamberlain. We had all kinds of people out there that were world champions, the two-time Olympic, two-time United States track and field champions. We had Olympic winners there and all kinds of things. So, and they kept their head at all times. You never saw them lose their head. They kept it under control. We need to keep our control. When we look around us, we see people losing their head all the time, picking on each other. It's got to stop. You cannot make good decisions when you are in panic mode. So anybody tries to get you in panic mode, slow down. Let's have a drink. Let's have a cup of coffee. Let's have a relax, time out, and let's get out of panic mode. We can't operate in panic mode. People don't make good decisions when they're in panic mode. Blame depresses people. Well, if you watch the other TV shows, you'll see a lot of blame being thrown around and a lot of credit being taken for things. That's not good. That's not a healthy environment to be able to do the kind of work we need to do here. And then overwhelming is not good. Anything that's overwhelming all the time is not good. It's got to be overwhelming, depresses people, causes a lot of apathy and diversion. And you spend more time on the apathy and the depression and the diversion than you do in solving the problem. So, as you know, I just saw the ambulance stopped the other day right in front of my house to help some 95-year-old lady who fell on there, and I heard people yelling out, "Keep your heads, everybody, keep your heads." You know, the ambulance is coming. The people who know how to help her are coming. Let's all keep cool. And that's very important that in difficult times, and we are in difficult times, that we don't pass blame, and we don't take all the credit ourselves, and we don't have overwhelming. Okay, so now, because I don't have much time left, I'm going to move my little thing about businessmen up to the front tonight. I'm not really going to get to what I really wanted to talk to about tonight, but I came up with some selection because people have been asking me, they've been calling me, and they've been asking me on the street, "Brian, you put up some names last time. Why did you pick those people, and why are they on your list? They come from each of the political parties, but why did you pick them?" And I said, well, we have what we got to work with. We're not going to change the candidates. I didn't put the candidates up. The parties put the candidates up. They all know what the problems are in town. Some don't recognize the problems, but and some don't have the background to recognize the problems because they're in different fields and things. But by the way, did we ever put my schoolhouse up there? Probably not. I don't know. The criteria I used, and this isn't all-inclusive. I'll probably add one next week or take one off when I think about it more. But basically, experience in owning or running a business is a very important entity for a selectman if you're going to be running a business. I mean, if you want to run a business that needs a lot of help, and you already got other things to do too, then perhaps it's a wise idea to have that business experience. So when you go to select your selectmen, make sure they've got that experience. If you don't, it's going to be very difficult for us to run like a business. Number two, preferably looking for people with a long time and who've been business people for a long time and have been through a lot of difficulties. the ups and downs, you learn from those as well as the good times. I mean, if anybody who's been through bad times, like a depression or wars and all kinds of things like that, then that makes the whole business environment change. And if they've been in environments where taxes are going up all the time, or taxes are going down all the time, or people are being affected all the time by closings of factories and this and that, they're going to have a different experience than people who haven't been through that. Next is, has the person displayed the willingness to work with members of all organizations and individual citizens in a professional manner? And whenever I see anybody treating citizens poorly and snapping at them and all that, I take notice of that when I see them being very good. I just saw one the other night. I think it was John McCain on one of the national TVs. Boy, was he good with a question asker. He was really handled her. I don't even know what party John McCain's in because I don't pay that much attention to it. Boy, he really was good to this person, and he really encouraged the person to ask more questions. And he didn't like the questions, but he did take them, and he gave the answer in a very civil manner. And I said, boy, that's really a good example. I almost felt like taping it, showing it on the program here. So that's very important. And with other organizations, with other selectmen, with people in the town, and it's all got to be done in a professional manner. And you don't have to take my word for it. You just need to watch all the programs. And now, you know, I think I'm having some effect here because, number one, people are beginning to say they're all in favor of the development now, and I'm happy to hear that. And as I said last week, and they're all of them were saying they're businessmen, and I'm glad to hear that too. So it's up to you to determine which businessmen you think are better, you know, follow this kind of criteria, and which ones don't. And that's easy enough for you to see. I don't need to talk about that. So, and the next is people that live up to their promises. You never see a good businessman not live up to their promise. The customer comes first with businessmen. And if they make promises, whether they're in election year or any time, they are going to live up to their promises. Right? And if they don't, then they're going to have a tough time. So now I'm not saying they won't make a mistake once in a while or forget, or there might be some promises they have to come and say, look, I'm sorry, I promised that, but I can't keep that promise. Well, that's okay, as long as it doesn't happen with all their promises. It's got to be a rare exception to what they promised when they ran for election. None of this running for election stuff and then not following through on your promises. And that's not good, and good businessmen do not do that. When they make a commitment, they follow up on it, and sometimes they take a loss doing it with their customers. We have many examples of that in this town where people will live up to their commitments. We also have a lot of examples where they won't. Next, it's the people have exhibited proof of such. So I'm always looking. What did they say, and did they do it? Proof. Now, I have a thing I call trust but verify, and that is you trust everybody, but then you verify and you verify and you verify, and then after you verify with individuals 6 or 7 times, and they always turn out to be trustful, then you don't have to verify so much anymore. And I worked with people that were part of my team, experts that were part of my team, that they were in, say, Africa when I was in South America. But we thought the same way, and I could trust them because I knew how they thought, and I knew how they would answer the customer's questions. And I knew that it would be something that I would approve of, and that I would, and they, vice versa, too. They knew what I would be doing, and we worked well as a team because we had the trust. But that doesn't, you don't just trust everybody willy-nilly. You have to trust and verify. So that's very important, and that's what I'm doing with the bond package. I'm trying to trust and verify and make sure that everybody has as much information possible. So now, once again, I'll put up these candidates, and I'll say that I've got them in random order here. Somebody asked me, are those priority orders? Absolutely not. They're random orders, and there's a list here of, I think there's 9 on there. Some of them, each from each party. They're all different weights. Some got much more business experience than others. Again, as I said last week, I tend to think that the Republicans are heavyweights in this for one reason or another this year. Maybe they won't be 10 years from now, or maybe they weren't 10 years ago, but this particular year, they got some pretty good, strong people running. Jay Budaezi's got a very good background. He's been in the business for like 32 years, running his own businesses and things, and And whether he's equal to the others or not, or better or worse, I don't know. But you got to ask him a lot of questions and put him through that verification formula I just showed you on the last slide. And then Matt Brennan's in there. I've talked to him many, many times. He's not the most heavily experienced businessman in the world, but he does have business experience, and more than anything else, he does think like a businessman. I can talk to him. You know, he asks me questions, and I ask him questions, and we talk. We don't agree on everything, but and he has certain things that are high priority for him that I don't even understand, and I have high priorities that he might not understand. But in general, we can have a discussion, and we can talk about things, and we can agree to things or disagree with each other, and then go have an apple afterwards together. And then Mr. Pozo, he's got all kinds of experience right in his town, running businesses. He's an accountant. You can't argue with that. I don't know. I haven't seen him in a town running, but he has volunteered to go in and help audit books and do things. Nobody ever takes him up on it, but he's running for office, and I think he could probably help us a lot as part of a team of business people. If he gets in a minority where there's no business people, he probably can't help us at all. But I couldn't help you if I was in a minority where there's no business people. I mean, I have that problem already in town, right? So there's just a lot of people I just cannot communicate because we don't speak the same language. Then I put Art Melcher in. I like Art Melcher. I think Art Melcher has his heart in the right place. He's been involved in the town for 20 years or something, doing different things. I think as a member of a good business team, he can do very well. Some of the things he does, I don't agree with at all, right? But that's the way it goes, you know. And so that's kind of what we got for a choice here. And again, I encourage you. We're running out of time, but I would say if there's any candidates that don't have any business experience and they don't show a business aptitude. I mean, some people can have a business degree and a lot of business aptitude without experience. I would say, you know, probably vote for them if they're really objective and fine people. But otherwise, what I would do is I'd give each candidate that doesn't have the right background a rose of thanks. Send them a rose and say thank you very much for at least volunteering to run, but don't give them a vote. And I'm not particularly picking anybody out individually. I'm just saying we need people that can help and that can speak the language and work together. And we got to send the non-business people a rose of thanks, and then include them in the solution later. By all means, you know, we're not saying we don't want your help. We just want to say we don't want you to be a selectman, but we do want your help. So after the election, we want to get you involved, and then eventually maybe you'll have enough experience to be a selectman and to be part of the team. So I am now out of time. I didn't talk about anything I wanted to talk about tonight. So next week we'll start all over again with trying to finish out the environment for success, and we will move on to expediting the solution, and unless some more bond information comes out this week and I get diverted for a week into looking at that and trying to understand it, because right now that's top priority after the election. The election is the most important thing, because unless we get the right team in there, we're not going to be able to go down the triangle the way we want to. With that, I thank you very much. I did get a little dream the other day. My great-grandfather said to me, Brian, we got to move a little quicker here. Maybe you ought to up the cadence of John Brown's body and move it along a little. Well, I tried that. I couldn't get the cadence going too well, but we do have John Brown's body on again tonight at the end, and maybe next week I'll try again to speed it up a bit. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Following week, I think, is for November 6th anyway, is the election. I will be putting some signs up in town saying, vote please, and vote for businessman if you can, you know, or businesswomen. It doesn't matter to me the gender, as long as they have the knowledge and the background and can work together as a team. So please vote. Get an absentee ballot. Next week I'm going to put up the pictures of the people who can help you with that. And if you're not going to be around, get an absentee ballot. If you're not a voter, sign up to be a voter. And please help us. We need your help to get this town on the right track and get that money coming in so we don't need these kind of bond issues as often in the future. Thank you very much.